The courthouse was unusually quiet that afternoon, with only a handful of cases left on the docket. Judge Douglas Harrington, a stern-looking man in his late 50s, adjusted his robe as he glanced at the next file. His expression darkened as he read the name. Case 236, Regina Thompson, the clerk announced. Regina Thompson, a well-dressed black woman in her mid-30s, stepped forward. Her tailored navy blue suit and sharp heels echoed professionalism. But the way the judge's eyes scanned her spoke volumes. He didn't see her as an equal, only a target. Parking violations, Harrington muttered. His voice carried a sharp edge as he addressed Regina. Ms. Thompson, it seems you've accumulated quite a list of unpaid parking tickets. Regina's voice was calm but firm. Your Honor, I believe there's been a clerical error. The tickets were issued while I was attending official duties, and I've provided the necessary documentation. The judge cut her off, his tone dripping with condescension. Are you suggesting that our system is incompetent? Regina maintained her composure, but the room's tension was palpable. Not at all, Your Honor. I'm simply stating that I've already addressed these matters, and I have proof if you'll allow me to present it. Harrington smirked, leaning back in his chair. Let me guess, you think you're above the law? Typical. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Regina's jaw tightened, but she refused to take the bait. Your Honor, I'm here to resolve this matter, not to argue. The judge's smirk deepened. Very well. I'm fining you $5,000 for these violations. Pay today, or face immediate detention. Gasps filled the room. Regina raised an eyebrow. Detention? For parking tickets? That's not standard procedure, Your Honor. Harrington's voice rose. Don't lecture me on procedure, Ms. Thompson. You do well to remember your place. As the gavel slammed down, Regina's calm exterior cracked just enough for a flicker of irritation to show. She collected her papers and began to leave when the judge added, almost gleefully, let this serve as a lesson to those who think they're untouchable. What Harrington didn't know was that Regina Thompson wasn't just anyone. She was a senior federal prosecutor who had recently been assigned to investigate systemic corruption in the judicial system. His name had come up more than once. The next day, Harrington sat in his chambers, reviewing files when a sharp knock interrupted him. His clerk stepped in, looking pale. Your Honor, there's someone here to see you. A federal prosecutor. Harrington frowned. Send them in. Regina entered, flanked by two other prosecutors and an investigator. She placed a thick folder on his desk, her calm demeanor now replaced by a commanding presence. Good afternoon, Judge Harrington. I believe we need to talk. Harrington's smug expression faltered. What is the meaning of this? Regina opened the folder, revealing documents, transcripts, and evidence that painted a damning picture. Your Honor, over the past 6 months, our office has been investigating allegations of judicial misconduct, including racial bias and financial improprieties. Your name appears in numerous complaints, and yesterday's courtroom antics only added to the list. Harrington's face turned red. This is outrageous. Regina leaned forward. What's outrageous is the number of lives you've ruined with your blatant discrimination. Your history of disproportionately harsh sentences for black defendants has been well documented, and your financial records suggest kickbacks from private detention facilities. Harrington tried to bluster his way out. You can't prove any of this. This is a witch hunt. Regina's gaze was steely. Oh, we have proof. And before you ask, yes, we've secured warrants to seize your financial records and personal communications. You've underestimated the people you've wronged, Judge Harrington. The room was silent except for the ticking of a clock. Harrington realized he was cornered. You can't ruin me, he said weakly. Do you know who I am? Regina didn't blink. Yes, I do. You're a man who thought his power made him untouchable. But justice is blind, Your Honor. And now so are you. News of Harrington's misconduct broke within days. The judge resigned in disgrace as the investigation uncovered years of corruption. Regina became a symbol of resilience and justice, her name celebrated in the media. But for Regina, the case wasn't about fame. It was about showing that no one, not even those in power, was above accountability. And as she walked out of the courthouse for the last time, she smiled, knowing she had turned the system's weapon against itself. As news of Judge Harrington's fall from grace spread, the legal community reeled from the revelations. His former rulings came under intense scrutiny, and appeals flooded the courts. Many defendants, primarily black and marginalized individuals, had their sentences overturned or reduced. Regina became a reluctant celebrity. Reporters followed her everywhere, eager for statements about her role in exposing Harrington. Though she remained professional and measured in her responses, privately, she grappled with the weight of her success. One evening, as she sifted through files in her modest apartment, her phone buzzed. It was her mentor, retired federal judge Anita Gray. "Regina, I've been watching the news. You've made waves, but you're not done yet." Regina sighed. "I know. Harrington was just one piece of a larger puzzle. This isn't a victory. It's a starting point." Gray chuckled. "Good. Keep that fire. You'll need it for what's coming." Harrington's fall revealed an intricate web of corruption. Several judges, law enforcement officials, and even attorneys were implicated in a scheme to profit from harsh sentencing. The private prison industry had funneled millions of dollars into the pockets of those willing to sacrifice justice for personal gain. Regina's team expanded their investigation, uncovering horrifying stories of families torn apart, lives ruined, and communities devastated by the greed of those entrusted with upholding the law. But the deeper Regina dug, the more dangerous her mission became. Anonymous threats began to arrive. Letters slipped under her door, emails filled with vague but chilling warnings. Her team urged her to take a step back. "Regina, these people play dirty. You've already exposed Harrington. Let someone else take it from here," her colleague Mark insisted. Regina shook her head. "If I back down now, they win. This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's been silenced or crushed under this system." One name kept surfacing in their investigation: Judge Leonard Royce, a powerful figure in the state judiciary. Unlike Harrington, Royce was charismatic, well-connected, and outwardly progressive. But beneath the surface, he was just as corrupt. Regina knew taking down Royce would be infinitely harder. He had allies in high places, and any misstep could destroy her career or worse. The team spent months gathering evidence, building an airtight case. They uncovered emails, hidden bank accounts, and testimonies from whistleblowers who had once feared retaliation. The day finally came when Regina faced Royce in court. This time, she wasn't the defendant, but the lead prosecutor in a case that had captured national attention. The courtroom was packed. Journalists jostled for space, and protesters gathered outside, demanding justice. Royce, ever the showman, entered with a confident smile. He greeted the jury with warmth, shook hands with his attorneys, and even winked at a reporter. But Regina wasn't fazed. She stood tall, her opening statement delivered with precision and passion. "This case isn't just about one man. It's about a system that has allowed power to corrupt justice. Judge Royce betrayed his oath and the people he was sworn to serve. Today, we hold him accountable." Over the next several weeks, Regina methodically dismantled Royce's facade. Witnesses testified about bribes and backroom deals. Financial experts traced illicit payments. Even Royce's closest allies began to distance themselves as the evidence mounted. Royce's confidence eroded. By the time Regina delivered her closing argument, he looked like a man cornered. The jury deliberated for only a day before delivering their verdict: guilty on all counts. Royce was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, his career and reputation in ruins. Outside the courthouse, Regina addressed the crowd. "Justice isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. Today, we've taken another step toward a system that serves everyone equally. But there's more work to be done, and I promise you, we won't stop here." The crowd erupted in applause, but Regina felt a quiet resolve. She knew this fight wasn't over, not until the entire system was dismantled and rebuilt on the principles of fairness and equality. As she walked to her car, a young black woman approached her, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," the woman said. "Because of you, my brother's case is being reviewed. You gave us hope." Regina smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and determination. "That's why we do this. For people like your brother, and for every person who deserves justice." She drove away, the weight of her mission heavier than ever but her resolve unshakable. The fight was far from over, but Regina Thompson was ready for whatever came next. Months after the Royce case, Regina's success became both a blessing and a curse. While her work inspired a wave of reforms and investigations nationwide, it also made her a target for those who had benefited from the corrupt system. Her office received anonymous tips, some genuine and others carefully planted to mislead her team. Public officials who had once turned a blind eye now actively resisted her efforts. Meanwhile, Regina's personal life became a battlefield. One evening, as she returned home, She noticed her front door slightly ajar. Her pulse quickened as she stepped inside, finding her apartment in disarray. Papers were strewn across the floor, her laptop was smashed, and a chilling message was scrawled across her wall. "Back off or you're next." Regina's hand tightened around her phone as she dialed the police. Though shaken, her resolve hardened. She met with her team the next day, their faces grim as they learned about the break-in. "This proves we're on the right track," Regina said firmly. "They're scared, and they should be." The threats only fueled Regina's determination. Her team's investigation widened, uncovering a sprawling network of corruption that extended far beyond the judiciary. Wealthy donors, corporate executives, and even prominent politicians were implicated. One name stood out: Senator Victor Langston, a powerful figure with deep ties to private prison companies and a reputation for suppressing progressive reforms. Langston was untouchable, or so it seemed. Regina knew that going after a sitting senator would require absolute precision. She began quietly gathering evidence, coordinating with whistleblowers and allies within federal agencies. Months later, Regina's work culminated in a high-profile Senate hearing. The chamber was packed as she took the stand, facing Langston and his allies. The senator, a towering man with a silver tongue, greeted her with a patronizing smile. "Ms. Thompson, we appreciate your dedication, but don't you think your investigations have gone far enough? Surely you're not suggesting that someone like me would be involved in such distasteful activities?" Regina didn't flinch. "Senator Langston, the evidence speaks for itself. Your connections to private prison contracts and your role in suppressing judicial reforms are well documented. This isn't about what I think. It's about what you've done." She presented damning evidence: emails, recorded conversations, and financial records linking Langston to illegal activities. The room buzzed with shock as the senator's carefully constructed image began to crumble. Langston's composure cracked. "This is a baseless attack. You're overstepping, Ms. Thompson." Regina met his glare with calm defiance. "The only thing I'm overstepping, Senator, is the line you drew to keep people like me out of rooms like this. Justice doesn't cater to your comfort." The hearing sparked a national outcry. Langston's allies tried to discredit Regina, accusing her of overreach and bias, but her unwavering professionalism and the strength of her evidence silenced most critics. As the investigation progressed, Langston's web of deceit unraveled. He was indicted on multiple charges, his political career in tatters. The victories came at a cost. Regina's relentless pursuit of justice alienated some colleagues and friends. The constant threats and public scrutiny took a toll on her personal life. Yet she remained steadfast, knowing the stakes were too high to falter. Her work inspired a new generation of lawyers, activists, and everyday citizens to demand accountability from those in power. Reforms swept through the justice system, dismantling much of the corruption Regina had exposed. One evening, as she prepared for yet another late-night strategy session, Regina received a letter. It was from the young woman whose brother's case had been reopened. "Dear Ms. Thompson, because of you, my brother is home. Our family is whole again. Thank you for giving us hope when we had none." Regina folded the letter and placed it in her desk drawer, her heart heavy but full. She knew the fight wasn't over. There were still battles to be fought, injustices to be righted. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Regina Thompson wasn't just a prosecutor. She was a force of nature, reshaping a broken system one case at a time. And she wasn't stopping anytime soon. Regina Thompson's legacy grew with each passing day. Her relentless pursuit of justice had toppled some of the most powerful figures in the country. But the deeper she dug, the more she realized that true change was a slow, painful process. The fight wasn't just about taking down corrupt judges or politicians. It was about shifting an entire system that had been built to protect the privileged and silence the oppressed. As the months wore on, Regina's office became a hub for those seeking justice. Former prisoners whose sentences were overturned, families whose loved ones had been wrongfully convicted, and activists who had been silenced came to her for guidance and support. Regina didn't just serve as a prosecutor. She became a beacon of hope for those who had long been forgotten. But no victory ever comes without a cost. Regina had alienated many of her former allies, and the isolation weighed heavily on her. The constant barrage of threats, the betrayal by former colleagues, and the pressure to continually expose corruption took a toll on her mental and emotional health. Late nights at the office, endless phone calls, and constant meetings left little room for rest or personal time. Her friends, those who had stuck by her side since the early days of the investigation, were worried. "Regina, you need to take a break," Mark said one evening as they reviewed documents for yet another case. "You're burning out. You've done more than enough." Regina looked up from the stack of papers, her eyes tired but determined. "I can't stop now. If I stop, everything I've done, everything we've worked for, will be undone. I can't let that happen." But even as she spoke, a small part of her knew that Mark was right. The system she had worked so hard to expose was still in place, and there were still so many people who needed her. The burden was heavy, and no one could carry it alone forever. Then, one day, it all came to a head. Regina was called into a high-level meeting with the Department of Justice. Inside the sterile conference room, the weight of the situation became clear. Her investigation had not only uncovered systemic corruption, but it had also unearthed a sprawling network of organized crime that had infiltrated various levels of government. It was bigger than she had ever imagined. But this time, the stakes were different. The Justice Department wasn't just asking for Regina's help. They were asking her to take the lead on a massive, nationwide operation to clean house, to dismantle the corrupt systems that had allowed such power to thrive unchecked. The room was filled with a mix of politicians, law enforcement officials, and analysts, but Regina felt an unexpected sense of calm as she listened to the proposal. "We need someone with your experience, your knowledge of the system," the Deputy Attorney General said. "You've already exposed the cracks. Now we need you to help us shatter the entire foundation." Regina took a deep breath, realizing that this was her moment. Not just to expose the rot, but to rebuild. She nodded slowly, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. "I'll do it, but we do this the right way. No compromises, no exceptions." Regina's new mission was daunting. She worked tirelessly to build a nationwide coalition of prosecutors, law enforcement, and whistleblowers to go after every last vestige of corruption. She even worked with grassroots organizations, empowering communities to hold their local officials accountable. The people were finally being given a voice, and for the first time in a long while, they felt heard. But as the operation unfolded, Regina realized that there was no easy way to undo the damage. It wasn't just a matter of putting the right people in prison. It was about changing the very nature of the system that allowed injustice to flourish. It was a process that would take decades, not months, and she had no illusions about how difficult that journey would be. The operation was a success, but not without its casualties. Some of her colleagues were compromised, and certain officials managed to escape justice. Still, Regina found solace in the fact that they had exposed the corruption for what it was. As the final round of indictments were handed down, Regina stood on the steps of the courthouse, flanked by her colleagues and supporters. The air was thick with anticipation, but there was also an undeniable sense of triumph. "We did it," Mark said quietly as he stood beside her. Regina nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "No, we didn't. We started it. And that's what matters." She paused, looking at the sea of reporters and activists gathered around her. "But this is just the beginning. The work is never done. It's a fight we have to keep fighting, day by day, for every person who was wronged, for every voice that was silenced." In the years that followed, Regina Thompson's name became synonymous with reform and justice. She went on to hold positions of influence, using her platform to advocate for widespread systemic change. Though she continued to face resistance, she had earned the respect of those who had once dismissed her as a mere prosecutor. But Regina never lost sight of what truly mattered. Her mission was always bigger than herself. It was about creating a system where justice was no longer a privilege for the few but a right for everyone. And though her journey had been long and fraught with personal sacrifices, Regina knew that her work had made an indelible mark on the world. As she stood before a crowd at a rally years later, speaking passionately about the importance of holding those in power accountable, she thought back to that day in the courtroom when she had first faced Judge Harrington. "Justice is not something you wait for," she had said back then. "It's something you fight for." And in that moment, Regina Thompson knew that the fight for justice was one she would never stop fighting, no matter the cost. "We're not done," she said to the crowd, her voice unwavering. "We've only just begun." And with that, the fight continued. As the years passed, Regina's tireless fight for justice brought sweeping reforms across the country. She became a symbol of hope and resilience, proving that one person could change the course of history. Her work wasn't finished, but the seeds of change had been planted. Regina stood before a crowd one last time, reflecting on how far they had come. The battle for justice would continue, but it was no longer an impossible dream. It was a movement that could not be stopped. "Thank you for standing with me, for standing with us. The fight for justice isn't over, and it never will be. She smiled, knowing that her mission was far from done. And as she walked off the stage, ready for the next challenge, one thought resonated in her mind. We've only just begun. If you found this story powerful, make sure to hit the subscribe button to stay updated with more inspiring content. Don't miss out on future stories of justice, resilience, and change.